Collision Course is back. Schedule will be on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers.
Hello, Bridgette. How are you?
Truthful answers.
We have commercials, so mute and hang out.
Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings, with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and co-host Jenny Vaught as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo chip? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hey everybody, this is, hey, my volume just went blasted through the stars, so just, all right, my volume just keeps going for, all right, let's try that. My volume was kind of going crazy all over the map. All right, so it's Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, and I was sitting here trying to think about, how to, begin to introduce these concepts, because as a rigorous biodynamic farmer, and having gone to Rudolph Stiner College, that was a gym that closed after 30 years in the Sacramento, California area, where I took biodynamic certification, where I took a whole bunch of nutritional and medicine courses, and also I've taken my a whole year of phenomenology courses. So where I entered into Rudolph Steiner's work, I entered through like the biodynamic door, and then took lots of other things that kind of branched off from that area that in which I was learning: soil, biodynamic farming, animal husbandry, nutrition, nutrition of soil, nutrition of bodies, and phenomenology study, spiritual science study of our environments, and how to study our environments using whole brain, concepts and thinking. So I was trying to think about, it's only been recently, and also over the last few years, I've been taking anthroposophy medicine, plant medicine courses as well online, because it's really hard to find all this kind of information where I can get hands-on learning and school, teachings in the United States. So a lot of it has to be kind of online. So everybody kind of, when you're dealing with Rudolph Steiner kind of work and how it develops you, you could look at like Rudolph Steiner as this tree. And that, it's a tree with thousands of branches that come off of Steiner's work and his thoughts. Steiner was a nutritionalist, number one, and educated doctors. And in Europe, there are still some colleges that after you go through medicine that you can go through Steiner programs to, get your skills certified in anthroposophy medicine. So anyway, let me go ahead and also backtrail here because I forgot to open, but I'm just really excited about the guests that I'm going to have today and the topics that we're going to talk about. And I just want to try to help people. There's so many branches of Rudolph Steiner's work. There's education, Waldorf, there's a lot of people that hear a lot about that. The original CSA community, sustainable agriculture, like if you buy a CSA box, you get one every week from your farmer that's, biodynamically inspired people. So there are a lot of working things that are in, the communities that, you may have heard of or connected you to Rudolph Steiner. You just, so many branches. Sometimes it's so difficult to figure out which branches you're going to go down, walk down and across the end and then walk back. But I also want to tell listeners, okay, so Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. If you go to the main website and you click on studio, I'm in Studio A, scroll down to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a bee with pollen on its legs flying towards a flower. And you can click on that and you can get bio information about me and contact information if you want to contact me. Just for that. And then we are listener supported. So also click on that funding page and, we have amazing heirloom seeds that, you can put in your prepper thing or grow this next year. So I always recommend our heirloom seeds to help support our network. Okay, so I don't know. I think it was a couple months ago. I ended up on a call with this gentleman and he started talking, which really kind of got my attention, was, I think I lost it. Hold on one second. Let me find it. It was talking about economic anthroposophy. And that's just not a branch of the Steiner tree, that I had kind of gone down. So I found a whole bunch of websites that, I haven't really been able to thoroughly read to kind of gain kind of more of an understanding. So I'm going to be learning a lot. But it's actually called associative economics. And so I was reading up on that, and there were a couple things that kind of were interesting here that it talked about. Some of the themes central to address by associative economics include the following: how the three functions of money become three qualities, why the factors of the production are better described as factors of price formation, true pricing in lieu of the efficient market hypothesis, the concept of gift money not synonymous with donations, and loan money not synonymous with loans, moving from a real or personal credit, property rights in terms of the fundamentals, sociological law, understanding that the land is not the market ever. I thought that was a really amazing thing. Understanding that the land is not the market ever. What is in the market is the right to own or use the land, understanding in detail and technically how one uncovers the gold standard, or what happens to the balance of payments, or whether there can be banking in an associative economy. The idea of associative economics is often also the inspiration behind such things as community-supported agriculture, CSA, ethical banking, social finance, community land trusts, and local currencies. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of gives you kind of a definition about, the road that we're going to head down today. It was just kind of an interesting definition, and I'm sure our guest is going to have a lot more to say about that. So anyway, hi, I'm going to have our guest come on, and his name is Paddy Delany, and he has created organization. He has created an organization called Frega. That's kind of how I found out about him. And I think I have some reverberation going on here. Hold on, let's see if.
Hello, hi, Bridgette.
Oh, hi.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Do you hear me clearly, or do you hear?
I can hear you very clearly, Bridgette.
Okay,
we can both
great.
hear you. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, I just wanted to kind of give kind of a basis of, associative economics or economic anthroposophy, because that was a concept that you had talked about on a video meeting, and really became inspired about maybe learning more about that. But I haven't done so because I've been really busy, so I'm glad that you're on the show. And so we're going to talk to Paddy kind of about how he started out, and got into Steiner work, and then how it's kind of evolved into what he's dealing with now. So go ahead and talk as long as you need to. Get it all out.
Hello, Bridgette. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I must say, it's an opportunity that Mandy and I, Mandy, my wife, is with us. And this is a journey we've been on together. Frega, it's an acronym for Freedom Global Abundance. It's based on the principle that we're so used to working from an ecology of scarcity in when we approach things, and we sort of really have evolved Frega to the point where we look at what I call it ecology of abundance. Because if you tend to look at scarcity, the universe will always give you what you believe you feel that you're able to receive. So if you approach things from an economic scarcity point of view, don't be surprised that the universe is not going to disappoint you. So we approach things from an ecology of abundance rather than scarcity, and then everything just really changes. But to answer your question, how this journey started, we have it's. If I need to really go back a bit of history, and then you can sort of understand the groundswell to it. We, as you can gather from my accent, I am a South African. My wife and I, we spent a good part of our lives, Mandy and I, in South Africa. We made a conscious decision from building a fairly successful business to move to New Zealand. But we also made the decision that we wanted our children to be also brought up in an anthroposophical education. So we enrolled them in a little school outside Titirangi, which is a suburb outside Auckland, and it was an anthroposophical school based on Steiner principles. And this would have been when was it? January 2008. So it was a conscious decision. And these dates are important because it's all part of the journey. On arriving it was in January 2008, a small school that had been going for some 30 years already. It had been founded on Rudolph Steiner's principles, but it was also being funded and supported with very little support from government, but it was more support from the community itself. And in terms of donations, there was no sort of set economic structure in terms of obligations to pay a set amount. It was all done on a sort of voluntary basis, and it had flourished for 30 years. Very successfully, and had got to the point where, there were, I think at that stage when we arrived, about 120, 130 students at the school. But what then happened was, as we all know, the global financial crisis hit. and that was in September 2008. And the world as we knew it changed. The world sneezed and everybody got a cold as we knew at that time. And a lot of the principles that we always felt at that stage as being sort of the world ostensibly was in some sort of harmonious state, the economics behind that changed dramatically. At that time, I had become a trustee at the school. And was fairly involved in the activity of the school activity. And I had the pleasure and opportunity I think it was fortuitous at the time, when there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Christopher Houghton Budd, who had just done a PhD in anthroposophical banking, which he had published it in 2007. And he had foresawn already that the global financial crisis was going to come. There's no question about it. The existing structures and the way that the financial structures have been built to that point couldn't last. And he had actually published his work in 2007. And because I was a trustee at the school, and the school itself suddenly found itself in a problem for the first time after 30 years, where suddenly the groundswell of support from the parents, the ability for parents to be able to contribute without the assistance from a government body was very telling on the parents, because the economy obviously was in distress, and this really compounded the danger of the school existing. And because I was a trustee at the school and he was on tour, I had the pleasure of meeting with him. And in discussing with him, the question was, what would Rudolph Stiner have done? How would we have gone and solved this problem? And he pointed to an interesting sort of few chapters in his book. And of course, he says, comes back to the basic principles of the threefold social order. And he says, we tend to forget the principles and go and look it up. And it was a very, very interesting few days. So we, so Mandy and I, my wife and I, we sort of, decided that, we're going to sit back and just let this happen. Is a school after 30 years going to collapse because we haven't adopted or adapted to what should be, the school needs to be more proactive in taking control of the responsibility of what's happening, and not just leave it to chance. It had to happen. And that's when the idea started. At that stage, we had a group of us got together. It was a sort of a little Sunday afternoon. I remember it was a meet at the garage, a couple of the trustees from the school, and we went back to first principles. How would we go about bringing about this change? And it was then that we had to come up with a name for what we're looking to do. Maybe I'd like to bring sort of Mandy on board now, who explain how that name came about, and then explain how it originally started. Mandy?
Yeah. Hi, good evening. So basically, we had to work out a name, and we put a whole lot of the energy that we would like the company that we were trying to establish. So we've just put a whole lot of names on there, what we would like to achieve with this energetic business we were trying to get going. So we put a whole lot of names down, and the word popped out as Real Stew, which stood for ripple effect, energy, abundance, life-changing, transparency, sharing, transparency, empowerment and energy, and wealth and wisdom. So that is where we started off with the name. And it stayed that way for a while. And in the last 2 years, we felt the energy had shifted a bit, and we changed it to Frega, which stands for Freedom and Global Abundance.
That's it. And what then picked up we sort of initiated a few sort of projects, got the community to get actively involved rather than standing back. And I'm pleased to say that the school, it took a while, but it flourished. And now I understand there's something like 400 children at the school. It's gone from a class 1 through to a high school now, where prior to that, for the first 30 years, it only went up to, I think, grade 10 or 7, year 7. So it's obviously now flourished. But the concept was very, very well received. But with that started at the same time, there was we decided that why would we limit it to what was happening within our own community in the church? I'm sorry, with the school. So we decided to see if we could sort of extend this, because New Zealand itself and Auckland and the local community was still in distress because of the global financial crisis, and there was a competition was promoted by a local incubation unit called the House, which is an incubation unit in Auckland, where they sort of said, well, are there any ideas out there? Is there ways we as a community, a group of people, by working together and just approaching community projects differently, is there a way that we could actually sort of change the fortune of the community and obviously ultimately sort of New Zealand itself? So Real Stew, because of our sort of successes, we entered the competition, but we never read the small print, and the small print said that it had to be a project that had to be initiated by residents of the country. We had just arrived in New Zealand itself, and we weren't residents of the country. So although it was an initiative of the community, we got pretty far in the in sort of going through the. I think there were about 270 entrants. We got down to the last 10, and we were the last 10 standing. But we couldn't proceed with it any further because we didn't qualify in terms of the terms and conditions. But notwithstanding that, that we were given the opportunity to participate in a further program with the Ice House, which then went on to 2013. Now, this was sort of 4 or 5 years later. We had a couple of initiatives on the go. And at that stage, the UK Trade and Industries, which is a government agency from the UK, were out in Auckland, New Zealand, looking at what are all the new initiatives that are on the go. They saw what we were doing, and they sponsored and moved us as a community, as a project to the UK. So we arrived in December 2013 and have worked closely with the UK Trade and Industries. But we found that a lot of the initiatives that we were trying to get going at that stage didn't really work to the scale we wanted. And we then pivoted and changed in beginning of 2017, and we changed the name Real Stew to Frega, as Frega stands for Freedom Global Abundance. But we also sort of picked up at that stage, maybe a lot of people aren't aware of it, but the United Nations, and this is really the cornerstone of what we are now aiming to do with Frega, the United Nations in 2015 released the sustainability agenda, that said that the principle of the agenda is that by the year 2030, there's recognition that there are 17 basic elements that need to be addressed as a matter of urgency, or the world as we know it, or the way we sort of live our lives as we know it, will no longer won't be as we know it. It's going to cause some major problems. And those 17 principles of what they call the United Nations Sustainability Agenda is based on, number one, is that we have to find a way of alleviating poverty. If we do not find a way of alleviating poverty, there's going to be problems. A further point was that if we do not find a way by the year 2050 of being able to grow twice as much food in half as much land using half as much water, the geopolitical stature of the world as we know it will never be the same again. So there's some very, very sort of clear principles put out. So what we've done with Frega is picking up on the number one aspect of the agenda. We said, what if we could, again, as a community-based project, work together to alleviate poverty? And we picked up number one. Now, Frega is it's an acronym for Freedom Global Abundance, but it's got one philanthropic purpose and one philanthropic purpose only, and that is to financially emancipate the disenfranchised communities, one community at a time, one person at a time. And what I mean by enfranchising is that a lot of people aren't aware of it, but there are 2.5 billion people in the world right now that have access to no financial services whatsoever. And that's 30% of the world's population. And there's a lot of people that are another 3 billion people that have limited access to financial services. And of course, we all know that the current disposition of wealth is that you have 99% of the world's wealth concentrated in the hands of 1%. So there's a lot of sort of things clearly wrong. So what we set out to do in Frega is to bold task is to correct that. And we believe that it's possible, and we've sort of certainly set our standard out there, that if we were to adopt the basic principles of threefold social order, and by adopting a lot of the principles that we've actually successfully adopted in saving the schools on a bigger scale, we've taken the task of trying to resolve, to actually financially emancipate or provide financial services to the 2.5 billion people that don't have it at the moment. Now, how we've actually gone about to accomplish that task is as follows. In the beginning of 2017, we recognized the fact that the world is from a technical perspective, is divided into two broad groups. You have what is known as what are called the Web 2 world, where we are, if you look at the way technology has evolved, when the internet first started, you had what's known as the Web 1, where you interfaced on the internet was purely on a static pages. Remember those good old days with dial-ups. That changed with the Web 2 world when everything started going to central servers, and you have these huge corporations that have been built, the Amazons, the eBays, from a trading perspective, the Googles, the Facebook, all the social media pages. All of these big corporations have become huge corporations by providing for us the ability for us to communicate, engage, and interact. They've actually gone and given all of us free access to an array of channels that we can use to engage and communicate on, whether it's through free email, through social media, through obviously using the devices like mobile phones, which has obviously had a bearing. With mobility being increased, it's made it that much easier for us to communicate and engage through instant messaging, through the WhatsApp as platforms. You know them all. We've got them all. In addition, there's a lot of companies have gone and built a lot of applications on that you can use to enhance the way you communicate, engage. But what's actually happened is a lot of these tools have been given to us for free. But the quid pro quo pro is that in exchange for these services, we agree that our data can be accessed and used by them, can be monetized. We become the product. And they're able to monetize the information and retain the commercial value of that. So what you find has actually happened over the last 10 to 15 years because of this Web 2 movement is that an increasing amount of time of us are so dependent on communicating, engaging through using these free tools that we, in exchange for which we've actually passed on the one universal resource that we all have in absolute abundance, and that is our user-generated data. So every time you communicate and engage through email or social media, we leave a footprint behind, but we've agreed that should be retained by the service providers. So what we have done with Frega is we said, what if we could create a parallel universe, create a parallel a new sort of platform where we in turn can also provide the same services, where an increasing number of us can choose to communicate and engage and interact, no different to the way we do it in the Web 2 world. But in the Web 3 world now, what if we can create these tools where an increasing number of people can use our tools in this environment, where the difference is that when we use these tools, any commercial value that comes about from the fact that we have engaged in interact, rather than that commercial value being retained by the portal or the corporation that's actually created the platform, why don't we actually take that commercial value and monetize what we've gone and done, just like we do it has been done at the moment, but we actually retain it and we keep it to those people that actually used the data, that created the data in the first place. So it started off by us developing one application, and that was a portal whereby you can, we call it a user group at that stage, where you can actually go and set up a sort of a page where you can communicate, engage. And then we started to develop more applications, and now we've got 19 of them. And basically what's actually happened is these applications are increasingly being used by individuals, businesses, or social groups, for the simple reason that they are there to solve their problem. These applications are being used by them quite successfully to solve their problem. They're not being used because they want to solve the world's problem. That's being used because it solves their problem. And what we've actually discovered is that I could be, for example, a business like may run a farmer's stall market where I've got a whole lot of products and services on a shelf. And a lot of people have been coming past, and for a couple of years, I've been selling my merchandise to people, but I haven't been able to really gather information as to who they all are. So what we do is we provide a simple point-of-sale types, a tablet system that runs on the web, where if somebody was to pick up the items off the table, I can go scan with a barcode reader. It picks up the information as to what they've actually bought. It brings up a bit of a tally. I would take the payment like we normally do, but then we say to the person concerned, "Thank you for giving me that support and honouring me with your support. May I please reward you with something in exchange, an exchange of value?" And the person says, "Yes, certainly." But what we do is we found a way that the value that we pass on to somebody, they've certainly paid over to us the $50 or the $100, let's say, for the merchandise that we've purchased. But we've actually found a way of then recognizing that $50 to $100 and pass through to that person a series of tokens that have the same commercial value to what the actual amount that was paid to me for the product that I bought. And this is sort of very interesting. So we found a way whereby I would be paid the $100, but then we would pass on to that person these tokens. But these tokens have got two very, very special properties. These tokens represent the right to receive a distributed share of income that we are receiving in our Frega ecosystem that's actually growing at a geometric rate. So what I mean by that is that we've got 19 applications already. We've got 1.7 million people in our database in 182 countries around the world. We've got over 6,000 businesses that are around the world that are subscribing and using our applications. And because they're using more than one, there's about 22,000 subscriptions. Every day, every month, every second of the day, there are transactions taking place because of our applications. But whenever these applications take place, when that business pays for the use of that service, no difference to at the moment where they may use software as a service from one of the third service providers in a Web 2 world, or if they're using our social page like Facebook, where there's an advertising revenue, rather than use that, they use the revenue that we generate revenue in our ecosystem. It's the same revenue that currently these businesses in the Web 2 world were previously paying for. The difference is they pay for it now in our Web 3 world. But we are now starting to generate transactions in 115 currencies around the world every second of the day, and they're increasing all the time. So what we do is we take a slither of all that revenue that's been generated because these businesses are wanting to use our services because it solves their particular problem. We take a slither of that money and we actually put it into what we call an underpin fund, and we start paying it to all the users of the ecosystem in proportion to how many times they interact and transact on our platform. Now, what also happens with the balance of the funds that we are receiving for providing these services that these companies are paying for, we also distribute all of that. And another point I need to make about Frega. Frega is known as a DAO, which means that we are a completely decentralized autonomous organization. We do not have a single employee in the whole of Frega, not a single one, and yet we are growing. And yet we have a support team. We have a technical team. We have a global support members in 18 countries. We've got people on the ground that are actively promoting and supporting Frega in 182 countries. And we've got technical team members all around the world that support the technical basis of our platform. And yet not a single one of them is an employee. Because what we do is we take all the money that has been generated for providing the services that people are happy to pay for because it solves their problem, and we are distributing this money 100%. And it is distributed in such a way that every single participator, everybody active in our ecosystem is receiving a distributed share of this money based on the proportion to which they are giving the energy to make the system work. And it's actually sustainable. So scale, it's working. So what you find is actually happening is me as an individual business, I may have I've got my business as a farmer's stall. I've got this point of sale system. I've got a whole lot of customers that are coming past to buy merchandise from me. They give me the money that I was happy to receive. I'm happy to pass on the goods to them that they're happy to have bought. But then I'll honor that transaction by rewarding them with some tokens that represents the right to receive a distributed share of the income that we are earning every second, every part of the day. Now, you must keep in mind that what's actually happening is you have a scenario where the revenue that we are getting in is ingrained at a geometric rate. Why I say that is that an increasing number of new people are becoming members of the Frega ecosystem because that person who went and registered to claim the commercial benefit of being rewarded for the fact that they passed over that energy is choosing to register to claim that benefit. And that process of choosing gets them to become a member of the ecosystem. They then start receiving in real terms the actual distributed value of the fact the transaction took place, but they're also receiving a distributed share of an increasing pool of funds that has been generated because our ecosystem is growing. So you have the situation that every second of the day, as new people are interfacing, it's a natural consequence that more people are becoming part of our ecosystem. But what's starting to happen is that if you look back 2 years ago when the first of the applications were released, and by the end of this last year, just in December, we had 19. And when you look at by the end of 2019, we're expecting to have hundreds of applications, not just the 19 we have at the moment. And we're expecting to have a lot more people and businesses and social groups using our applications because these applications address their needs. So it's growing at a geometric rate. But the transaction whereby I have these items on my shelf and I've sold to the customer, that transaction is actually an arithmetic transaction. That's based on an economy of scarcity. I only have so many bars of soap that I can sell. I only have so many bottles of honey, and I only have so many meals that I can serve from the kitchen. I can only sell so many tables that I've manufactured. But those are all based on economics of scarcity. But yet the reward that I pass on to somebody is based on the return is based on an economy of abundance, because geometrically the underpin is growing at a faster rate than the rate at which I'm able to, through economics of scarcity, serve more tables or make more products that I can sell. So you have this interesting phenomena within our Frega ecosystem, whereby the value or the energy that comes from the transactions that are taking place arithmetically is actually geometrically compounded. So from a pure mathematics perspective, and that includes, by the way, a lot of the mathematics is based on Fibonacci ratios. It's pure applied mathematics. It's in its purest form. You have this phenomena where through my actions and the actions of many in the ecosystem, it's compounding. And that because there is no wastage in the system, it's the value of that compounding is handed back to the actual consumer. So we have this interesting phenomena that as time progresses, as more and more customers are interfacing with merchants that are using our applications, they are starting to discover that the money that they have spent on buying something they were going to buy anyway is coming back to them in a value which has got some sort of fiat distribution, some sort of dividend distribution that they are able to actually cash in on. So it's almost like having your cake and eat it. They've actually gone and bought the items they're going to buy anyway, but in exchange for which they've actually received some sort of commercial value. It's almost like putting the money back into their 401k. I went and spent this money buying something, and yet I've gone and got back a dividend, an item which is paying me a dividend based on the money that I was going to spend anyway. What we then do is we show that the longer I hold this right, this lifetime right, or this real right to earn this dividend, it matures in value. So, and we then give the person the right, if they so wish, to go and sell that dividend, the right to their dividend on an exchange to the marketplace. So we have a scenario where I've spent the money anyway. I receive this sort of asset in exchange that pays me a daily dividend. And I'm also given the right, and that daily dividend is increasing geometrically, but I'm also given the right for me to go and now sell that on an exchange. And that's a free market forces allows that to do that. But if you were to analyze in its purest format, what we've really gone and done is that if you look at the Web 2 world, the revenue that Facebook, Google, and all those platforms are currently generating, they are taking that revenue, they're using it to pay their fixed overheads, they're employing salesmen, they're employing their global support, and they're paying their technical team. And the balance of the money, they're then keeping for the shareholders. And those shareholders now are the 1% of the world that owns 99% of the assets. So what we've gone and done now with our model is we've flipped the whole thing. What we've actually gone and done, we've taken the same revenue that they would normally charge for advertising or software as a service. We've taken that revenue that people are happy to pay for. We've distributed it in such a way that the people that are first bite of taking some of that revenue are those people that are providing the support services, the salesmen that we don't normally have to employ but are now actually empowered to be part of Frega, the global support team that actually supports it, and the technical team. So we are providing the same service, except these are people, these are members of the ecosystem that are happy to do that as in an empowerment basis, not because they're employed. And the balance of the money that's left over is actually distributed back to the very consumers that caused it in the first place. So if you look at the value that's growing geometrically, it means that over time, as more and more people are using the applications in our ecosystem, we've actually gone and flipped the wealth of the world, because the 99% wealth, which is corporate value as listed on the stock exchange, is now owned by the very consumer. And the 99% of the consumers now own 99% of the wealth. So we actually have flipped the whole economic chain. But what has also happened is that when the transaction takes place, and I may enter into a transaction, let's say here in the UK, when I register to claim that transaction, we apply mathematics that creates a relationship between me and other members in our ecosystem as at that moment in time globally throughout the world. So you have an interesting phenomena where as more and more people are starting to use our applications on the ecosystem, they are connected through what we call a digital DNA. It's pure applied mathematics, pure Fibonacci ratio mathematics, and it's all connected up. So what actually happens is it's like the butterfly effect. It's the 100 monkeys. Okay, as soon as something happens in one part of the world where a transaction has it's almost like a spark of energy, where a transaction took place that caused us to be paid a fee for a service that somebody's prepared to pay for, that we are prepared to sort of give, or the Frega is prepared to give. We've taken that spark of energy and we've actually go and distribute that commercial value, and we actually chop up that particular revenue source, or that transaction revenue source, 6,432 ways, and it gets distributed around the world to a large base of our members around the world who are just part of the ecosystem because they are part of people that engage. So you have this interesting phenomenon that the 99% wealth is not concentrated in the hands of the consumer at the source, but it's actually concentrated in the hands of the members of the ecosystem in general. So it addresses the whole scenario where individually everybody in the ecosystem is now starting to receive a distributed share of money. And we're talking proper money. We're talking fiat money. We're talking 115 currencies are being distributed every day. Now that raises an interesting phenomenon, because as this starts happening, we now sort of go to those same people that up to now have never, ever had the opportunity to have access to any money. And we now say to them, if you log on to the account, you will see you've got a Frega account. You will notice that you have got a distributed share of wealth in 115 currencies that have come to you, not because you bought anything, not because you sold anything, but because you are part of an ecosystem, a global community that shares that. And that sharing that took place is actual money that we received. That we have received because of a transaction we've rendered, and we then go to those particular members and give them an opportunity to be KYC'd, because we are because we are regulated, obviously, by the FCA, and will be under the regulations of the SCA here in London, it will be a requirement that we do need to be KYC'd. But that also means that individuals that previously would never have qualified to ever have access to financial account will now have access to a financial account. They will actually have money in an account that belongs to them, and this is money that they're entitled to have because they're part of the ecosystem. But this particular money becomes predictable, recurring, and increasing. So suddenly that's income. And because you have income and it's reliable and it's predictable, it's an increasing, you can access financial services. That's financial service. You can actually borrow against it. You can take an advance against it. I don't like to use the word borrow in that sense, but rather you take an advance against something that you're entitled to have because you are part of the ecosystem. And you can take an advance and you can access capital. We've also created a few other tools that allows us to sort of provide financial instruments based on pure applied mathematics, where capital can be unlocked or equity released to these members that have entitled to receive this money, and the whole economics changes. So what we've really gone and done is taken the theoretical possibility and made it a practical possibility by actually, obviously successfully executing our model. And all we've gone and done is flipped the Web 2 world into what is known as a Web 3 environment. And that's where it's starting. And we've also created in the process a complete threefold social order, because if you think it through, we've got this balance between our economic, social, and our political life. And I say that political in the sense that if I look at my social life, I choose to engage and interact. Currently, I choose to engage and interact in the Web 2 world. I'm using the Facebooks and the Googles and the free emails and all that. But over time, we suggest that maybe if we socially engage and interact in the Frega world, using the same applications, our own email system, our own social platform, our own instant messaging system, our own e-commerce platform, we choose to socially involved in there. Economically, we are actually, because of the energy of our collective energy, we choose to actually, we get the commercial benefits of the fact that we choose to be part of the ecosystem. And of course, then from a political point of view, because Frega is a decentralized autonomy, there's no 1%, there's no sort of commanding entity that's going to dictate. It's not a case of the vocal minority determining what the passive majority. It says nothing. So we've actually created this complete balance there's a balance between your social, economic, and political life. And we have the scenario where people are empowered, not employed. We have this. We flipped the 1% of the world's wealth. Of 1% no longer owns 99% of the wealth of the world. We empower, and we also, in the process, we provide hope. And hope is an amazing force. I always say to people, and I've found when talking to some colleagues here who maybe sort of haven't understand the poverty and out there, and they sort of say, well, but why would £1 a day or £1 be so exciting to somebody? And I sort of said, well, it's a different world out there, but there is a tsunami of hope that we've actually, where suddenly somebody doesn't have to sell one of their children so the second one can survive, where we can actually provide an outcome where so often people end up with a situation in their life in circumstances that are beyond their control, because the circumstances culturally, politically, whatever the scenario is, makes no difference. But we've actually found that by working as a collective, working together and giving people the ability to do what they normally do, which is communicate, engage, and then and be able to reward that with a real tangible financial reward, it provides hope. And that's a galvanizing force. And we've come across many instances already around the world of members in the Frega ecosystem who've actually expressed that. So I say to people, there's a tsunami of change that's coming. Look around you, it's coming. We have everything to believe that Frega will be a major force in the years to come. We are already growing. It is our aspiration to have 1 billion people within the Frega ecosystem within 3 years from now. And that's only 1,076 sleeps, by the way, so it goes pretty quickly. But what you will find is, as we continue the way we are, because scaling is not a problem. We don't have capital constraints. We don't have. You have 1 billion people that that suddenly have hope and have empowerment and are able to sort of have more control of their destiny. That's a galvanizing force. But what you will find in the process, we are actually addressing, we solve one of the biggest problems that the world's got, and that is the question of poverty. And we actually are very much in line with the United Nations' stated goals. So it's not that we're not fighting the system. We actually support the system. And it's a win-win. A lot of if you look at the current way business is structured, there tends to be that somebody has to lose in order for somebody to win. That doesn't work with Frega. In Frega, there's no such thing as winners and losers. We all win. There's free choice in me deciding to use certain applications, but when I do that, thousands of people win because of that. But I win again in terms of passing value. So, and we find balance. There's complete balance in what we're doing. And when you have balance, there's no inefficiencies. You find that you can do a lot more. So that's really what we've actually managed to accomplish. I said to somebody the other day, somebody said to me, but how's that sustainable? You can't see how it can be sustainable. I said, well, let's break it down to first principles. Look at the thousands of businesses around the world that are currently using our applications and very happy to use these applications because they're sustainable to them. They're using these applications because it's cheaper than what they were using before. It's giving them the ability to increase their revenue and reduce overheads. They're using the CRM system. They're using online booking system. They're using our financial systems, and they're choosing to use them because it works for them. So, when you say it's not sustainable, well, that's strange. There's thousands of businesses out there that really are sustained because of what we're doing, and there are new ones being added all the time. So, I said, just be careful, what you say, because, we are moving, we're growing quicker. So, that's really what we're all about. But Bridgette, I've given a good 15 minutes there. No doubt you have a few questions at this stage.
Well, okay, yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me get my. All right, there, my volume gets kind of way up there. I've got some reverberation in there. I can totally hear. Okay, anyway, so no, I was listening to everything that you were saying, and I just wanted okay, so we have like 5 minutes before we go to 4-minute break. Right. And so when I got involved with Rudolph Steiner's work, it took me a while being involved with it to really kind of fathom the depth and the branches off the Steiner tree, because the basic core of it, from what I've learned and what I've been explained to, came from the future. So when you're listening to people like Paddy and other people who've been involved with Fold work, different aspects of Steiner work, they're talking about concepts that can be applied now in the now to create a better outcome in the future. So one of the things, like for biodynamic farming, when I first got involved with it, I thought, well, hell, this is indigenous farming. I mean, this is the kind of things that indigenous people would do. I mean, it was perfectly clear. And so me trying to find that indigenous, connection with Steiner's work, and, like what tribe or, these kinds of thoughts came from. So I was always looking in the future to figure out the processes that I was learning in the now with the biodynamics. And then when I realized, I had a long talk with somebody who's brilliant in Steiner work, and he said, well, Steiner was very well educated, and he also kind of was a mystic. And they, basically say that, he saw into the future like 500 years and what life on this planet was going to be. And then he accumulated knowledge and information from the data field in the future and then brought it to the now as the tree. And then all of it that's been going out into the world from the now is moving towards a different future. So sometimes you have to remember that Steiner's work is to save our future. right? Save the soil in the future because very few places are going to be livable, from where he was at in the 500 years. So all these different ways that we have to do economy. So, when you're listening to Paddy, if it's hard to understand these concepts, maybe something you want to listen to over and over again. Some of you may grasp them really well. We're talking about what we need to do now as an act of saving our future individually and collectively. So I just kind of want to put it out there because this isn't like, the work that Paddy's doing it's not really attached in the past.
No, it's very much in the now, Bridgette. And I have debates with students of anthroposophy, and they do talk about almost like the future. I said, well, what's wrong with now? Why do we have to put off for the future what should be done now? And it's almost like when you talk about the future, you always like leave it for somebody else's responsibility, and it's not. It's our responsibility. So when you take it on board as a now, you'll be quite amazed that it actually does work, and that's what we believe we're accomplishing, because we've taken it on board, the responsibility to do it now, because it will impact our future. And it's not a future problem that has to be, So, I had an interesting debate on that one, but that's really where we are at. I see you're coming up, obviously, for your commercial for a minute.
Yeah. It'll just be in like 1 minute, but I just wanted to add, I was lucky because when I came into Rudolph Steiner's work, we fixed the soil in the now, and it's projected. Whenever you're working with the soil, you want to think about 50 years in that soil's future. So I'm developing, seasonally, I'm there in the now, I'm working with it, but my goal is, in the future, 50 years down the road, and what it'll be able to grow. So that's kind of like, anyway, we'll be back in 4 minutes, break time.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse. All will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Woo people, again, it's like the 20-minute show in 2 hours just goes by so fast. But you're back at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And we're in the second hour with our great guests, Paddy and Mandy. And they're talking about their inspirational journey and the kind of work that they're doing economically and societally, I guess, societal, something like that. Anyway, I was thinking one of the concepts that I really like in the threefold structures work with Rudolph Stiner is one of them is social responsibility. And until I was involved with, biodynamics and a lot of the other type of work that I was doing, there wasn't really anyone or groups of people that I was around that one of the most important philosophies was social responsibility. That it was, your individual responsibility to go out and do the work that you needed to do based on your information and what you thought was important for, society. So it's one of the ideas that I highly respect, that, part of that work is to put the responsibility back onto you. If you get the education, you figure out how it works, it's your social obligation to actually go out and help your society in a, positive, productive way. So I think the book is, what is it? The Threefold Human, I think, or what's the original book, Paddy? Do you remember?
I don't remember it, but it was I know that, look, there's a lot of writings in the threefold social order. Yeah. I don't know a specific one, but, the central thread that goes through there is the law of collective responsibility, as you say, and the collective energy of working together. And we do it for the higher good. It's not, and you don't go into any transactions expecting to win. You go into transactions to share. I found that it's we need to move away from a transactional way of doing things and rather in a win-win situation. So I don't look at any particular book. I just notice that all the writings point to the same thing.
Yeah, and that's what we need more people is the whole their social responsibility. That's if we just did a little bit we could change this world really rapidly.
Exactly. And so, you start the journey with it. You've got to start any journey with some sort of vision of an outcome. And what we've tried to do with Frega is we've visualized this Frega world in 1,076 sleeps from now. We just put it out there. That's only 3 years, and we sort of said, well, not if, it's when we get to that point. It goes quickly. What do we need to do now in order to, we as a collective responsibility, not somebody else's responsibility? Let's put some sort of time frame in it. Okay, why do we have to leave it longer than that? What if we can bring out that outcome? And if you look at if we don't do this, by the way, if we don't do this, and it's all of our responsibility, the world as we know it is going to be a very, very sad place. And I don't like to be sad. We don't want to be sad. It's sad as it is already, but we can make it better. And I'm a strong believer in hope. It was interesting. Somebody said to me the other day, picking up on the fact that this is not for self, it's for the greater good. Somebody said to me the other day, okay, you and Mandy are the founders and got this going, but have you patented this? Have you copyrighted this? I said, how can you patent and copyright this? If there are going to be people coming into this space that are going to do it better than us, and that's what we need to do. This is not patentable. The outcome is not owned by anybody. It's collectively our responsibility. And it was also another thing that somebody said to me, have you gone and how do you put it? What security guards have you put in place in terms of making sure there's no, being attacked by the dark side? How do if people were to log into to break into the code and actually steal the data? What have you done to protect the ecosystem from being attacked by the dark side? And it was interesting. Keep in mind, we release code into this ecosystem by our members around the world voluntarily, and when we do release this code, there's a set process. We obviously do it within guardrails of when and how we do it. And it was a couple of months ago, or about a year or so ago, there was a code release. And out of the blue, absolutely out of the blue, a message came to us from a group that quoted themselves. They were the Hackers Anonymous group. They didn't want to sort of say who they were. And they pointed out to us that there was a fault in our code. There was a defect that we should address, a vulnerability. And they sent through to us the fix. So I put it out into the stratosphere with our technical members. And they said, you were right. They've actually there was a vulnerability in what we were doing, and we applied the fix, and it made a big difference. And when we went back to this group to try and speak to them, we couldn't track them, couldn't find them. So I treat this as sort of, it's almost like you've got this battle royal taking place between the consciousness of good and the bad, and inherently I believe we are inherently good. If we're not inherently good, then that's a very sad state of affairs. But because we're inherently good, and the good will always outweigh the bad, so we don't have these sort of fancy things that are there to try and protect and own rights to secure positions, and somebody's going to be wealthier because somebody has to lose. It doesn't work that way. That's not sustainable, and that is really so. And we are looking to what I call the raising of consciousness. And that is what's happening, and we're going. It's amazing. Every morning I log on to the Frega ecosystem and I see what's actually happening, and it's fascinating. It's got a life of its own, but because there is a common outcome, there's a collective outcome. So. And that's really what amazes us is that if the universe will always deliver to you what you believe you're entitled to receive, and if we believe that we are going to win this journey, because I believe we are, and we put it out there, you'd be amazed. We do, and there's no limitation, and we don't want to go too far in the future, because the future, if we were to leave this for the next generation or the generation after that, why do we fix the problem now? We don't have to leave it all for later. This is something that we can do, and it's something that we are doing. Interesting.
Yeah, that's why I like to have people on my show who are already doing it, not talking about it anymore.
Exactly.
Who actually made it and are doing it, right? And you'd be surprised. there's small groups of people all over the place who are against all odds, putting stuff out.
And we're doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so exciting. I sleep at night like a baby. I wake up at 2 hours screaming with excitement, go back to bed. And I can see it happening. It's and it really is. So we don't have to be sad about it or concerned about it. I'm not worried about all the stuff out there. I'm very hopeful, and I can see already that there is a raising of consciousness, and we're in a better place.
Yeah. And, hopefully we're moving to a better place. And this is the other thing too, is I always tell people, I live like kind of on, kind of a different financial system than the whole. And because my whole idea is about, soil restoration and healing soil and, just a lot of that kind of stuff. And I feel like, even if I'm not making a giant impact in the world, like just fixing a small garden bed, today, doing something today, I really feel like it will inevitably, help the whole. So sometimes the simplest things that you get up every day and you do and you focus in on, you're part of your social responsibility and education, you'll start sleeping a lot better at night.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I also find that, where we are at, I have this debate with my colleagues online about it, and they sort of, are you working with the different governments? And I said, yes, at the end of the day, it's not a case of us and them. We work within the existing structures, existing systems. We don't resist and fight against it. We work with it. And we find that there is this, the world is changing. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of challenges out there. We know that, we see it every day. But the existing banking and financial system, we can't last, and it won't last, and it's going to be substituted by the new type of doing business, which is the new banking system, which is really the Frega way of doing things. The geopolitical structures are going to change, and the world is changing with it. So yes, there are some technologies out there that are questionable, but I believe that over time we're going to overcome those, and we won't be beaten. That's what I find exciting. And it's only because of this concentration of power of 99% of the wealth in the hands of 1% that's brought about a lot of the sort of disharmony, where it's profitable to be at war because that's how it is. But that doesn't have to be the case, and it certainly won't be the case in the future. Statistically, you can see it. The world is changing, and technology is going to, can be used for good, not for bad, and that's really what we are doing.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing.
Definitely. Bridgette, from the community perspective, you talk about the individual projects. What we are doing within Frega, we recognize it's the collective energy of the individual within the ecosystem that makes a difference. And it could be an individual, or it could be a community, and obviously ultimately a province, a state, and a country, and that's really how it all starts. But it starts with that first step. And we've come across a couple of initiatives already within Frega, and we've seen it in Gambia and Ghana and the Ivory Coast. And in India, there's a project that we've actually got going in India that came about on the basis of the core principles that we are following through. And we've actually found some really exciting initiatives that have come about, and across all the faiths as well. That's been very interesting too. We've come across some practical examples, whether it's the orphanage that we work closely with in India, whether it's the Kofi, who's a gentleman in Ghana who through Frega and through the basic principles of what we've been able to accomplish, has now managed to get his piece of land farming now with maize, and he's actually got an excess amount of maize available that he never had before. In Gambia, we came across a community of people, a gentleman by the name of Mandy, and we've got to know him fairly well. And he's now got to the point using the Frega principles where he's connected the two villages. There were two villages in Gambia where they've built now a road that connects the two villages, where they never got around to doing that before. But as applying the principles of the collective, they've actually connected the two villages together as a community now. And there's some practical examples of how this has been done. He himself financially has also found that his situations changed from where he was working in a library. He's now managed to have enough income because of the working within the Frega ecosystem, where he's now been able to start studying, and he's registered at a local university now doing a degree. And there's a few and it's all passively possible because he's part of the ecosystem. And so we've got some practical examples of it, and it's all what we've also done. We adopt within Frega as part of the distribution process. We have a sort of a tithing system where, as the money flows through the ecosystem, and we can track it, and it's a practical tracking of these transactions. There's a distribution being done in such a way that it's all done passively. There's no It's not a prerequisite that somebody has to do something in order to be paid, because that's transactional. That's Web 2 thinking. The mere fact that you're part of the ecosystem is sufficient. But what we have found is there are some practical examples where these projects have come about because of us as a global community working together. We've even had a situation which is quite exciting. There was one of the gentlemen in the Ivory Coast, chap name was Serge. He had a situation where we'd got to know him as a member of the community, just as a member who's engaging with us, and he was involved in a motorbike accident, and he in order for him to be treated at the local hospital, it was just not impractical. The current medical services there, and the only way would save his life. He had some metal in his. Going to be too graphic about it. It was stuck in his neck, and the community got together and they tried to sell some of his land. And the community got together to try and raise enough money so we could actually sort of conduct the operation. And all he could muster, and he needed to raise, it was $3,000 worth of, to get into the local private hospital to save him. And all he could sell was $10 for a piece of land. His whole worth of his land was worth $10. The community got together in the church and they raised about $5. And there was just no way it was going to happen. So what we did as the Frega community, and we took this on as a collective responsibility, and I don't want this to come across the way in terms of charity. It certainly wasn't. It wasn't. But it was just overnight the problem was solved, and the funds were managed to secured, and his life was saved, and but he's become a very integral member of our community. Since then, he's got married, and he's got a little girl. He's had a daughter, which is quite exciting. So there are a lot of practical examples of groups of people that have been able to practically, bring about changes, and so it's not just there's some practical examples of how it's possible, and there's many other examples like that which we're really excited about,
No, and I think it's pretty cool. For sure.
It is. And I know we can, and on a scale, this is a matter of scale now. It's scaling now, and we do work within the government agencies, but they're starting to realize that this is a commercial necessity. It's a practical necessity, and that's what's exciting about Frega now. And the end result is that we will get, an increasing number of people are starting to realize that they can. By working together as a collective, we can bring about the changes that we all desire, and it's just a raising of consciousness to make it work.
Yeah. Well, and the way I look at it is like, with how everything branches out, like wherever you start with Rudolph Steiner's work, because it is a future thing, coming into like the now concepts for a greater future. So it's always good to talk to other people who kind of have been, Steiner inspired. Let's just say that.
Yes, no, very much so. And it's not about ourselves. It's about this is not self. This is not centered around ourselves. It's centered around the community and it's our legacy. I suppose you want to call it for the future, future generations. And it's our responsibility. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It's our responsibility. As you say, there's the energy, collective energy that we pass on. But it's a case of applying practically what we've learned. And also, as I say, we found that there is a dimension change taking place, and that's what's exciting about it. And the government agencies are starting to recognize the fact that they have to change the way they do business, and even the large corporations. I can't mention the names, but we met with a large corporation in London a couple of months ago. Now they're one of the world's biggest food producers. There's 5 or 6 of them in the world, and they interface with some 2 billion people every year in production of food and delivery of food. They've got 72,000 farmers that currently produce the raw material to them. But the challenge that they've recognized that if we do not, as a community, as a people on this earth that are using the resources of this earth, if we do not find a way of being able to generate or grow more food or more in half as much land, using half as much water, and twice as much food, there will be a problem. And these large corporations are starting to sort of get back to basics. They're trying to find, how do we change the economics of the farm, where you're not totally dependent just on weather or on cultural differences. So how do you actually do that? You've got to find a way of making it more sustainable. And it's coming back to Rudolph Steiner's principles of farming, biodynamic farming, a more sustainable looking forward, planning your farms rather than sort of just looking at the now. And that's, they realize that the world has to do it. And Rudolph Steiner certainly saw it coming. And everything that he sort of talked about, if we don't bring about this change, it will be a sad state of affairs. And it's coming to pass. So, but I'm like the large corporations are recognizing that.
Yeah. Well, and, for me, I kind of work more in an indigenous way now. There was a Lakota man that came in and wrote, I think, Lakota Biodynamic Farming before he passed away, a Paiute man in Oregon. So he included the indigenous principles, fixed them into an American way of biodynamics, going back to the buffalo horn versus the cow horn, things like that, because biodynamics was indigenous. But one of the things that I've incorporated from walking, the red road or whatever how people want to talk about it, and from my teachers, is that in biodynamics, I have a social responsibility to the microbes, to the water, to the air, to the land, and to the animals and all the insects there. And so, it takes that social responsibility, to a different level. And I think when people start to kind of get that there's also other social orders, and social responsibilities that we have, not only to people, but to the things that were here before us, kind of a thing. Correct. I think that's when we start to really, get grooving with how everything should kind of move forward socially. And when I was in farming, they said that, 50 years, generally 50 years would be, if you constantly worked at it, would be ideal future. If you're going to get a farm, your plan needs to include at least 50 years. Yes. And so in the native, so something I just recently learned in the last couple of years from a native friend of mine, they always talk about, we want to push it forward. We want to play it forward, 7 generations ahead with what we do as a good human, being on the planet. And then I recently just learned that each one of those represents 500 years. And so what they're saying is like, we want to do it in a good way for everything here, for the extension of 3,500 years in the future.
Yes, very much so.
And so, so we're not talking about things where it's a hit and run thing. We're talking about long-term relationships, we're talking about long-term social responsibility, to, everything that exists here, because we should leave this place a lot better than we found it.
Yes, definitely. No, definitely, yeah. We've got to. You're right, and I think that you nail on the head. There is that, when the time comes for us to pass over, we've got to leave the place in a better place than what we originally were given. The pleasure of being to be part of this, and if that's our destiny, and it should be our goal, then that's good. We mustn't, we can't leave it worse than we started it. That's going backwards, and we don't do anybody a favor, certainly not ourselves or humanity as we know it. What we've also done, from a technical perspective, and very important, is it's through the inefficiencies of the existing sort of economic structures that we've actually got where we are now, and because you are sort of the existing economic structures depends, the commands comes from a different capital base, where the capital service providers are looking for a different type of return, very short-term return, unfortunately, and there's short-term consequences of that. So that's why we certainly feel, from a climate change perspective, from addressing the challenges from a broad perspective, there's the biodynamics has to be addressed. As you say, it's not something that's done overnight. You've got to plan this generations from now. But there's also cultural things that we've got to take into account. One of the biggest challenges, speaking to this particular food company, they talked about that there's a cultural thing that when a father passes on and he's got sons, and then the farm is now broken down into the smaller parts because each son gets a part of the farm. And there's this whole sort of, how do you handle that from a structural point of view to be able to optimize the production on the farm? But then it comes back to using the right materials, using the not having to in education, having the resources. We don't have to, we're not going to use pesticides and all that. It's not going to do the trick. That's just short-term gain, long-term danger. Okay. And that doesn't work. So you've got to get back to first principles and the biodynamics of it. And we've actually caused the problems. The world is sustainable, but it's us that's caused the problems. So, what we're looking to do is to take that head on and taking on the responsibility and say, what can we do to actually remove those blockages and to get back to the basics? And I'm very, very confident, and I've no doubt in my mind, because that's what it's all about, that it has been achieved, and we will do it. And because we've made that decision to do it,
Right. Well, another thing too, I think with, the whole principle of Frega, and then it can develop out in the directions that it needs to develop out freely. Exactly. That's kind of like that whole, future, thinking, or 3,500 years in the future, like, the mindset when you go on to you're going to create a biodynamic farm. How much land do I need? Instead of going, I'm going to become a farmer and I'm going to just grow one crop and I'm going to make all this money because, it's the only marketable thing, right? And then I go out of business and then I end up spraying all kinds of stuff because I don't have a long-term view past, maybe my life.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the problem. And that's the problem of economic scarcity, because we tend to, see these economic tools that are given to us, whether it's the land, the water, and we see it from a scarcity perspective. We look at it from a point of view of trying to optimize it in the now, not rather than the future. That's why we tend to believe in an economy of abundance, not of scarcity, and look at it from the energy that it gives us. But look at it from the leverage energy by working as a collective. And if we are less determined or less focused on self and our own self-worth and trying to sort of measure our wealth by these sort of trappings that we feel are important, it's not. Those are short-term benefits, but the consequences are something we don't want. So that's where Frega comes into the picture. There is everybody in Frega is empowered, not employed. It's not a master-servant relationship. It's an empowerment relationship. We take on the challenges of abundance. We look after each other. There is that collective responsibility to pass on that we've had the benefit of receiving today. But at the same time, obviously we look after communities, look after family. There's nothing wrong with that because that's sustainable, and that's important to have family structures. But the main thing is the community and what we leave behind. So, and that's going to come about by us, each one of us taking on that responsibility. But we also have to do it practically. We can't just talk about it. I did find that in the early days for Frega, when we got going, you have a lot of people would come to the meetings, and that's fine. There was the stated goals, and I understand the pressures of living has got its challenges, but you very, very quickly will start picking up, and you start realizing that this is not just volunteering and putting your hand up, it's actually doing. And that's what I find excited about Frega, is that there's a lot of us now around the world. And every day I'm coming across new people in the Frega world that I've never met before. And I'm pleased to say they don't know who Mandy and I are, even though we were the founding sort of founders and getting it going some years ago now. But they don't know who we are. And that to me is very important, because this has to have a life of its own. It's not dependent on any particular person or group. It works despite us, not because of us. And that's what makes it sustainable. And it's the essence of the spirit that counts. And we meet people that don't know who we are, didn't know that we were there in the beginning. And that's what I find exciting.
So it's frega.com, right?
Oh, no, yes, no, at this point, it's frega.world is the URL.
Frega.world. Okay, so that way, in case people want to go look or at it, or, they have questions, they can go look at it. So we're heading into the last half hour. So
right.
Maybe you and Mandy could talk about, I always look back in my life, to where I'm at now, and the work that I'm, really focused in on. And there's always like this pivotal moment. Do you guys remember like a pivotal moment? Could you tell me a story about your pivotal moment?
With Steiner?
Yeah, or just, the effects of it on your life, and, how it brought you. Or, there could be other pivotal moment in your life that is even more important. Just to talk to people about that pivotal moment, because that's the important place that's going to put you on the path, I think, sometimes, on your path and what your place is in the community. So anyway, just, tell us something.
Okay. All right, so I'll start with that one. So years ago, when I was quite young, and we went to an anthroposophical doctor because my sister couldn't get well. She was quite ill. And within 3 days, she was better with using anthroposophical medicine in the way that anthroposophy works and treating the body as a whole. My mom landed up working for this doctor. She was a nursing sister, and that really started our whole journey with anthroposophy. And he was a very wise, wonderful person. And we got to know the family well, and they became just part of an extended family, really. Then my youngest sister, we were at a convent, and she wasn't doing particularly well. And another friend of ours, who was also in the Anthroposophical Society, suggested that she go to the Waldorf school in South Africa. Got her in there, and within weeks, she changed from this really mousy person with no confidence, no future, no anything, into, she just transformed, really. And for me, that was a pivotal moment in my journey with Steiner, because we were all worried about her. We didn't know where she was going. We didn't think she could ever achieve anything. And she walked out a different person, and has made a very successful life for herself. So I wanted that for our children as well. We've got 3 together, and that's why we went to the Steiner School in New Zealand. There wasn't one where we lived in South Africa. And it's benefited them now. They're young adults now, but it has stood them in good stead. And we became very involved with the whole Steiner movement and what it could do and how it could change things. So that was really I would say my pivotal moment was with my younger sister and how it changed her and transformed her. And then we got onto the whole economic side of it as well. The one thing I would just like to say is that we do all have we have to help change the whole social economy of the world. But if you cannot lift your head up and support yourself to start with, it's very hard to pass that on to help somebody else. And that was a basis of Frega as well. You've got to be able to lift your head up, but knowing that you can support your family, feed them, put a roof over their head first, and then you can look up and start bringing about change and lighting that candle, really one candle at a time, and bringing light to the world overall. So that is why it's important for people to be able to get a passive income, and the energy from that can start seeping out to others. But give people that ability to, first of all, lift their head up and know that their family and their immediate family is okay, and then they can start helping others. So that was my journey.
I when I met Mandy, I came from I've got a BCom LLB background. I was a lawyer by profession, so very sort of that sort of background. And when I met Mandy, obviously Mandy's family was very much involved in that anthroposophical medicine side. Leslie, my mother-in-law, Mandy's mom, had her own worked for a anthroposophical doctor, as I say, even though she was trained in the sort of Western medicine, you can call it that way, and she worked for him. So of course that had been ingrained in the family. And when I became part of the family unit, I noticed it, and I came from a traditional vaccine type scenario. None of our kids are vaccinated. We obviously don't believe in that. But I came from my side of the family. It was all that sort of Western type feeling. And I've noticed it. It was amazing. And I moved out of the headspace. I found that a lot of the decisions I was making up prior to that was very much in the headspace, very much in the masculine. And, that tends to be a bit aggressive in approach. It tends to be, you tend to be you've got to win for somebody else has to lose for you to win. And I came from that background, and I very, very sort of realized that that wasn't sustainable. And, and I look at one of the teachings of Rudolph Stiner, and, when you look at the way history has been taught, and you hear that one statement when Alexander the Great got to the age of 33 and he burst out crying, because at the age of 33, he had conquered the known world as we knew it. And yet 10 years after his death, of his passing, his world as he knew it didn't exist anymore. And he really realized at that stage, as much as he had conquered the world through his sheer masculine power and through as being an army general, but he realized it was not sustainable. So you can't by force of will sort of dominate. It's not sustainable. And that's interesting to see. So, and when I sort of started to pick up on that and realized that, and I saw the way, Mandy and her mom and her dad and the way they lived their lives, where I came from, I converted very quickly. I very, very realized. And it all comes from the heart, not the head. And we then sort of started our own business together literally in the garage at home, and we built it to a very, very successful corporation in South Africa, which we then sold. And I saw the principles that we had adopted and how we've done a practical example of how it worked for us, and we made that as a conscious decision. That's how we wanted to bring up our kids. And as I say, we arrived in New Zealand, as I say, in January 2008. 9 months later, the global crisis hit, and it was then that we realized that, and while everybody said, oh, it's all going to fall over now, everything we've built, but, we get back to the principles. So we've gone and adopted a lot of what Rudolph Steiner has said. Don't leave it at somebody else's responsibility. It's our responsibility, and how is we as a collective do this. And that's really was it. So, and that was really the journey. I'd like to believe that, that the way we are going now, that in years to come, Frega or a representation of Frega or whatever format this may morph into, that it's going to bring about the change that is sorely needed. So I'm fortunate that we are now here in London, that we're in the UK. There's a lot of decisions that were taken along the way to get where we are now. So there is obviously the practical side of it, and I'd like to believe that we're making more good decisions than bad ones. That we have got the guardrails in place now, and Frega is able to sort of grow from strength to strength. So there were, situations cross our paths. Carpe diem, seize them when they do come up. Take on that responsibility. Don't think it's somebody else's responsibility. And as Mandy said, our big thing is Frega sustainability is worked on the premise that every single member of the community works in the ecosystem. And we have a golden rule in Frega: nobody's left behind. Nobody wins by somebody else losing. Nobody's been left behind. It's interesting how a lot of what we're doing is morphing in the practical sense, and that's where we are today. So Frega will be, is a force to be reckoned with, and it's getting there. And that's how we got to this point.
Yeah, I have so I grew up in two families of bloodlines of, genetic, original medicine type people, right? And so we a lot of our remedies were folk medicine kind of stuff. But I was a late bloomer to Steiner and, biodynamics, and then how it worked kind of with a lot of my other teachers, native teachers, and but I had a private practice for a long time. I still work on people. And I really wanted to go to the basics of growing plant medicines. And then when I started getting involved with the soil and stuff, I had to learn new relationships. And I'm still building my, relationships with like the microbes and the soil and the insects and the animals and all these kinds of things, because I realized just the principle of, social responsibility, but in the community and that community, until I could get that right, I couldn't grow plant medicines right. And that because my medicines wouldn't be good enough, you know what I mean, until I got the principles of how to deal with the basic community. And so through Steiner's work, I've learned a lot more about community, which I also didn't really learn about, earlier in life. I mean, I wasn't the status quo. I didn't jump on the backs of other people. But I did kind of martyr myself sometimes by over-helping and it got into bad situations,
And so, we know what it's like.
Yeah.
Done.
And so
into that trap.
Yeah. So, you start to a lot of this, newer stuff that's coming through, or like your guys' walk and thing. And it's funny to listen to Paddy because there's before Mandy and there's after.
Yes. Yeah, that was a deciding moment in my life. And I must admit.
Go ahead. Oh, I think I lost you. Where'd you go? Go back. Oh, did you mute? Are you there?
Yeah. So the very day I saw her, I fell in love with her. And before she even saw me, and I was with a friend, and I said, I'm going to marry her. That's my future wife. And I proposed to her 2 weeks later.
Wow. Well, you were just ready for change, weren't you?
She said no, so it took me 8 proposals, but she eventually agreed to marry me. But so there was a life before and a life after, yes.
Well, I think it's cute. Those are kind of relationships I want to see, where the man is like, before my wife, it was like this, and after my wife, it was like
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes, probably less than that. Is there anything that you guys, want to add in about your journey and the work you're doing now, and before we close?
Sorry, what was
so
that?
It just
a bit of a bad connection.
Connection dropped slightly there.
Oh, okay. So, did you guys want to close with the last few minutes of?
Yes, certainly.
About where you're at, and where you're headed, and maybe some inspiring thoughts.
Yes, certainly. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. First of all, Bridgette, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you guys. It's an exciting journey we're on. Every day I wake up sort of quite excited about what's going to happen today. I don't have any sort of trepidations or concerns other than I see the collective energy that's happening. And what amazes me is the type of people, the new people that are coming into our space all the time. And I just, as Mandy says, it's just consciousness, keeping yourself receptible and available at all times. And I don't put any limitations to what's possible. And what we're looking to do is obviously there's technical aspects to manage our growth, but that I'm not concerned about. That's something that scale and the universe wouldn't be putting us on this journey unless we're going to be successful. And so those don't concern me. I find I get inspired by the success stories we're having already around the world. And that in itself has an energy field which permutates again. And that's what I find quite exciting. But Mandy can give some sort of parting words on that what as well.
Yes, it is a very exciting journey, and it's about allowing things to flow to everybody around the world, or communities, to each other, and supporting and helping each other through the process, educating everyone as we're going along, and allowing them to achieve their goals and help that collective, but by helping themselves first, and raising the consciousness on the planet so that it can become a better place for all. And literally lighting that candle. You light a candle one at a time. If you light one candle and you pass that flame on to the next, you've lit their candle. And then they pass that on and you pass it on to others. And before you know it, you've actually spread that light and you've made a difference. And it can just start. It's as simply as that. Help yourself for starters. Get involved, whether it's talking to somebody or doing something that's going to help your business, and that then in turn allows that financial flow, and it flows to those that don't have, but it flows back to you as well. So it becomes a win-win situation for everybody, and that's how we believe we can start making a difference in the world and raise the consciousness to make the world a better place for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and anyone into the future, for future generations and in the years to come.
And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So I saw two things I saw for Frega while I was talking to you guys was maybe an online Waldorf school for those people who don't have Waldorf near them. That would be so amazing, wouldn't it? For somebody to start something like that.
Yep, that sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah, I just saw it. I was like, wow, can they do a college for adults too?
Of course.
Well, we can because we're reaching a lot of communities and a lot of people. So yeah, that's certainly something we can look at. That sounds like a brilliant idea. Which will also help.
Yeah, it would help parents too to, figure out ways to, help their kids, because they're going to have to, interact with them more with the Waldorf if it was online. But I really want to say, even though you guys are across the globe from me, me being in Nevada, I just really enjoyed you guys coming on and talking about Steiner. I'm very limited in my Steiner communities because of, the Steiner College closed up in May 2016, which was 3 hours away. So I don't get to talk Steiner much. So I'm in my own Steiner reality. So if you guys know other people who, are in different branches of Steiner that would love to come on my show, I would love to have them.
Yes.
And just to start trying to bring this about more in a way that people can get in touch with more of Steiner's work, and not as a cult, right?
No.
It's not a cult.
No, it's not a cult. Yeah, I know. We have been accused of that. They look at you funny and they say, it's not a cult.
Certainly not.
Especially when you
consciousness.
When you bring up the candles and that, they look at you very funny.
Well, Steiner gives us a foundation of what, we're going to need in the future, and how we interact with that, and how we educate ourselves in that, and how we bring it forward into the world is individually our decision, and what our communities, may need in that future. So that's not really a cult. It's expansion. It's an expansion of your previous belief system.
Definitely.
Well, Mandy had a Catholic upbringing. I came from a sort of a Methodist upbringing. Yeah, we are Rudolph Stiner sort of ingrained, but philosophically. So no, it's not a cult. But I tell you what, you've got to watch out, because they do. Sometimes people do look at us funny. So, and trying to explain that we're not cult.
Yeah. Well, there was a story. One of the teachers we had in biodynamic at the college was saying that back in the day, Rudolph Steiner was not interested in agriculture. He was interested in how the plants were being grown and the nutrient density. He was really much about, the nutrition that was going into our bodies, and educating doctors and people. So there were a whole bunch of German farmers that came to him at a convention, or contacted him to come and talk with them. And so he went out there and talked to them, and they said, at the turn of the century, they could already see the destruction of the industrial complex, with all the industrial chemicals and seeds. It was already starting to take effect. They could notice the changes in their soils already, and their seeds. And so Steiner, did the work, the agricultural lectures that are famous in biodynamics, where he, kind of went into the future to see what was going to be needed. And then he extracted the information and the practices in order to regenerate and restore the soil under, bad condition. But they said the story was that it was written into a format for, there's 10 farmers, they had these books, and they literally had to hide them because it would have been considered witchcraft. They could have been executed or imprisoned over the work of Steiner. So
unbelievable.
I know. So, we're not a cult, but we all believe that the future should be a lot better. And it's up to us to figure out what our piece in that is. And, like the indigenous people, 3,500 years in the future is a good, arrow to try to shoot at that target.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And you working with, just going back to Frega for a second, using Frega and you just connecting via the hub, people can actually start communicating. Well, they can communicate and help educate each other on finding a new way forward, and a different way, which they are, like you and others around the world, doing biodynamic farming and working with the soil and all that, which is important for sustainability, obviously, and use this as a platform to communicate that, educate each other, and generally help those that have never heard of Steiner or how to work biodynamically, and bring about that change and nutrition value and everything that needs to improve.
Yeah.
So
we've got on that platform. We've developed a platform within Frega called Frega Hub. It's www.fregahub.com, and that's starting to gain traction now as a portal where an increasing number of people around the world are choosing to use to communicate and engage through. We have got Frega Mobile, which is an application on all the platforms, will be released in a couple of weeks' time, very, very soon. And that's going to bring out a big difference as well. Zoom, as a Zoom functionality, is going to be incorporated in that. So there's a lot of very exciting new tools being created within the Frega Eco community that increasing number of us are choosing to use because it makes sense to do so.
Well, good. I love Zoom.
Yeah.
I see a lot of my clients internationally by Zoom.
Exactly. Well, Zoom we're working with Zoom as technical partners to come with us, and they're even looking prepared for us to white label it and to call it Frega Zoom within our ecosystem. So you're going to see a lot of the tools that you currently use. If you do it within the Frega ecosystem, it just changes the dynamics of that relationship.
Ooh, I could see all kinds of educational processes that could be good with that.
Exactly.
I'll just throw this out there. If somebody does start a Waldorf school online, I would love to interact as a biodynamic person.
If
and teach classes to the youth. I would love to do that.
And likewise, if there is anyone in your community that would like to maybe look at doing the Waldorf school.
Yeah, it's an impulse.
As an impulse, then let us know.
That's not a problem. Yeah, and then we would set up hub pages
us through our hub, and we can look at that. I'm sure there's someone in your community who would probably be very good at that and would like to run with that, because that will definitely be able to reach people that wouldn't know anything about Steiner or biodynamic farming or any other Steiner things. Yeah. So that could be a very exciting project for somebody.
That could. I know a lot of people that do biodynamic farming and, social stuff. So what I'll do is I'll put it out in my email list with this, I'll upload this show and I'll send it out next week sometime and see if we get any feedback about maybe.
Most definitely.
That would be
excellent. Some teachers stepping forward, because I know a lot of them, they don't want to move around. It'd be good for several different kinds of, teachers to have, like, they can do it at home and they can connect with kind of a global school kind of a thing. Probably would be a really great idea.
And they'll be financially emancipated because of that through the ecosystem. So finance is not a problem in those issues, because we have there is no financial impediment to these things happening. We generate a huge amount of money in the ecosystem already in 115 currencies, and so finance is not it will never be an inhibiting reason why Frega does not move forward or any of these initiatives.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I'm kind of inspired to. One thing, though, you have to help me get on the Frega Hub, because I've never been able to get on the hub. It doesn't let me in.
Yeah, no. Well, we've got a code update this next week coming on. Once it's through, I'll contact you and I'll take you on a journey of discovery. You'll love it.
Okay. Well, this is good news. So, let's work together and see if we can't get some educational stuff on there and maybe a little online Waldorf school. And
why not?
I'm really excited. I love to teach. I don't care if I teach for money. I don't care if I teach for free. I don't care. I just want people to listen to what I have to share.
You will be financially emancipated.
What's actually interesting is we know quite a few parents who are homeschooling their kids with Steiner. So for them to be part of that greater community and connect with other teachers or someone who could expand their knowledge and help their children working with the whole Steiner thing, that would be very exciting. So we could connect someone up with a lot of people.
So we're at the end of the show. Paddy and Mandy, Delany, and it's been inspiring. Anyway, thank you so much. And
you too, Bridgette. Look after yourself. Bye.
See you next week, listeners.
See you online.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message. Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank or all the